Truck batteries are often overlooked until a driver goes to crank up his truck and it won't start. But in an age where nearly every system on a truck is smart, can technology help? We're going to explore how trucking fleets can reduce battery headaches in this episode of HGT's Leadership Insights. I'm Deborah Lockridge with Heavy Duty Trucking, and today on this episode of HGT Leadership Insights, we're going to talk about truck batteries. This episode is sponsored by and produced in partnership with Enersys, manufacturer of Odyssey Battery. Before we dig in, remember to follow us on social media and subscribe so you don't miss an episode of Leadership Insights or HGT Talks Trucking. Today we're talking to Daniel Jones. He is application field engineer with Enersys, so he works a lot with fleets talking about batteries and how to keep them going. Daniel, welcome to the HGT Leadership Insights podcast.
Thank you, Deborah. I appreciate it.
So Daniel, why is it so hard to figure out when a battery is near the end of its life?
That's a great question. And the battery end of life is basically the best case scenario was when we have cycled the battery out. So it's went that many cycles and it's time to replace the battery. The other scenarios could be chronic undercharging or chronic overcharging, which could lead to shortened battery life. Increased temperatures also shorten battery life. These different scenarios require diagnosis on a technician's behalf to understand, is this truly a premature battery failure or has the battery cycled out? So we'd have to look at maybe the previous repair history data and those type of things to understand. And then we could also do the battery testing to back that up. So end of life failures, they occur at some point in time for every battery.
But you don't want them to happen when you're, on this on a trip, going to be stuck on the side of the road. So are there any signs to look for beyond the big one of the truck not starting when you go out to crank it up?
There typically is some sort of warning that you'll get with batteries. I want to say it's a warning. You may have a extended crank time or a slow crank. You may have, if you're doing some type of battery or cycling application where you have an inverter, you may see that your inverter's not running quite as long, or that your EAPU, your electric powered HVAC unit, may be cycling a lot more frequently. Those types of things are generally understood as you'll be overutilizing the batteries, or you're chronically undercharging batteries. So you'll get a reduced cycle time or a reduced capacity, and it'll continue to walk down in that fashion until you get a no start.
So beyond bringing it into a shop and running tests on it, we've got smart everything on trucks these days. I've even written about a smart fifth wheel. So last year, Enersys introduced Odyssey Connect. It's a battery monitoring system, right? That it's going to help give truckers insights into the state of those batteries. How does that work?
So it's a predictive monitoring system that works on your smartphone, and it analyzes the battery's voltages and it can see crank cycles. And when I say it can see that, it looks at it, and you think about it, if you were looking at an Excel chart and you were seeing voltages in buckets, it's going to understand that, okay, when this engine cranks, it can see that sine wave of voltage inflection. And it will warn you if those voltages drop too low during a crank cycle. So if you're dropping down too low in a voltage bucket, it'll give you a predictive warning. You can go back and look at some charts and see what your voltages were over previous 6 days, and temperatures as well. So it gives you a good baseline to understand how your battery is operating and its performance.
So does it give you like any warnings of like, hey, this thing's going to fail in a month or a week, or time to replace it, that kind of thing?
It may give you something like voltage is charging too high, voltage is charging too low. It's going to give you some very basic recommendations for warnings within the app, and it will make those recommendations for you. So yes, it will to a degree. But it doesn't typically give you, hey, how much longer it lasts. That was it. It'll give you, it'll kind of summarize that data and say, good, better, best, or warning. You need to check into this. So it will give you predictive warnings before the failures happen.
So you'll be able to tell to some extent, I guess, some of those things you mentioned that shorten battery life, like overcharging, undercharging, and maybe address them before that battery life gets too short.
Absolutely. And temperature as well. If it's being exposed to extreme temperatures, it'll also give you a warning there. So it's a fantastic tool, and we can much better understand if we have some bad connections between batteries within the bank, or if there's some type of application issue, we can go back and we can look at that data.
So I think that should help you actually extend the life of your batteries if you get a beat on what some of those issues are ahead of time.
Absolutely. So we can try to train to a better application or a better use of the application where maybe we're not drawing the batteries down as deep in discharge. Something like that would help tremendously. Or if we see one battery is undercharging and it may possibly have a loose connection, we can go ahead and fix that before it becomes a long-term issue. The longer it goes with those issues, the more the sulfate on the plates of the batteries are hardened, and the harder it is to remove that sulfate. So the harder it is to effectively recharge and get our capacity back in the batteries.
You mentioned, as far as some of the things that shorten battery life, about those extreme high temperatures. Yet it seems like it's when the weather turns cold in the winter, we hear a lot of complaints from truckers about their batteries not, and trucks not starting. Why is this so common?
So yeah, that's a fantastic question, and it happens. So we talk about batteries and we say cold cranking amps, and during the winter, engines are much harder to crank than they are during the summer. The oil is thicker, the components tolerances are closer together when you're in a colder environment. So it takes more amperage to crank that same engine in a colder environment than it does in a warm environment. But all the damage to batteries are done in the hot environments. So you'll get the damage on during the summer months and the walk down in capacity during the summer months. The engine is still easy to crank, so it doesn't require quite as much cold cranking amps as it does in the colder weather. So when we would get into the fall and into the early winter, you'll start seeing no starts, and that's primarily due to lack of capacity of the battery.
Yeah, it seems every winter we get these really cold snaps, and we've got a story on our website about how to keep your batteries going in cold weather, and that people are hitting that story a lot when it gets cold.
Absolutely.
So, what are some tips maybe for types of batteries to choose, specking tips, or when you're buying replacements? What do truckers need to know about actually what's available in batteries and what's actually going to have a better chance of giving them that longer life?
Well, I think just choosing the correct battery for your application. If you're running an application that doesn't require any type of I don't want to say standby loads, or where you're cycling the battery, such as parked HVAC units or inverters, some of your standard batteries work fine in those applications. But when you're stepping up into more demanding applications, you're going to need an AGM battery or a thin plate pure lead AGM battery. So the more you step up into those ranges and you're needing to cycle and start, you're going to need a cycling and a true dual purpose battery, which is a thin plate pure lead AGM battery.
And we've got, it seems like more hotel loads, I like to call them, in trucks these days, especially for long haul drivers. They're sleeping overnight. They want air conditioning in their TV and their microwave and everything else. Uh, what what do they need to think about when it comes to batteries?
Yeah, their total capacity. So they can look at um, how many amp hours they need in capacity and size their battery needs to that, and then also utilize the correct battery in those applications. The flooded lead acid batteries are going to have to be installed outside of the vehicle. Um, in all those applications. Whereas an AGM battery can be a non-spillable AGM battery, which a valve regulated battery, VRLA batteries, can be installed inside the vehicle as well. So that gives you a little bit more versatility or options where you can put those batteries.
Mhm.
And also, it gives you the availability to cycle those batteries down in a deeper depth of discharge. So selecting the correct battery and the correct application is a necessity.
All right, Daniel. Anything else that big tips you want to give truckers when it comes to batteries?
Well, they got to keep the connections clean and tight and make sure that their maintenance is always uh, up to date. So we need to test the batteries, clean the connections and cables, and properly recharge them whenever we can. So if we got an opportunity to get that vehicle in the shop and charge the batteries on a shop charger, that's also going to help prolong the battery life.
All right, great. Well, Daniel, that's all we've got time for today on this episode of HGT's Leadership Insights. Thanks for joining the show.
All right. Thank you.
And you'll find more episodes of HGT Leadership Insights along with HGT Talks Trucking on truckinginfo.com, on YouTube, or your favorite podcast platform.